Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope your day is starting off as fantastic as it possibly can. Once again, I'm going to start the video with the backdrop of some of the amazing pics that you all have shared on the I Choose Canada group. Just a little reminder, if you want your pic featured, landscape. You got to take the pic in landscape so I can use it as a backdrop. I'm going to share with you what some of the inflammatory rhetoric, what's taking up all the oxygen in the news cycle over the last couple of days, and then I'm going to explain what's happening in the background. And once again, good news for Canada. Who's been in the headlines lately? Reported here on Yahoo Finance from Bloomberg, Trump's 50% levy on Brazil shows the world nothing is off limits. Of course, Donald Trump is in the news. Sorry, wait, hold on one second. Let me interrupt my own video while I was recording. This is breaking news. Trump threatens 35% tariffs on Canada starting August 1st. So apparently we got a letter as well that starting August 1st, now Canada will be hit with 35% across the board tariffs. The details are unclear because I'm losing track of all the tariffs. We have a 50% tariff on steel, a 50% tariff on aluminum, and I believe a 50% tariff on copper. And now I don't know if this 35% tariff replaces those or if it's on top of those. I'll just read you Trump's statement as reported here on CTV News. He said, if for any reason you decide to raise your tariffs, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by will be added to the 35% that we charge. Trump, or the United States, who on Wednesday announced a 50% tariff on copper effective August 1st, wrote that the tariffs were originally imposed on Canada due to the U.S. fentanyl crisis, which the president claimed was caused by, in part, by Canada's failure to stop drugs from pouring into our country. Instead of working with the United States, Canada retaliated with its own tariffs. Starting August 1st, 2025, we will charge Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent to the United States, separate from all sectoral tariffs. Separate from all sectoral tariffs. Trump also wrote that there will be no tariff if Canada or companies within your country decide to build or manufacture products within the United States. And in fact, we will do everything possible to get approvals quickly, professionally, and routinely. In other words, in a matter of weeks. Okay, so it's just getting out of hand and a little bit ludicrous here. So let me continue with the video that I was recording and add this into the mix. Donald Trump has started issuing, or I should say the United States of America has started issuing letters to many different countries dictating what tariffs they will pay. Of course, American importers will pay the tariffs, but that's besides the point. Donald Trump threatened to impose a 50% tariff on Brazil over its domestic political affairs. Trump cited the treatment of former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, in his letter to Brazil on Wednesday, calling on authorities to drop charges against him over an alleged coup attempt. This trial should not be taking place. It is a witch hunt and should end immediately, Trump wrote in the letter to Brazil. And as reported by the BBC, Brazil vows to match U.S. tariffs after Trump's threats. So now you have the case that for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason, and I propose that no one really knows the reason, Donald Trump is going after Brazil now. He's threatening Brazil with crippling tariffs that could pretty much suspend trade between the two countries. Now, what are the motives for this? Like I just said, nobody really knows. The only thing that we really know is that that is what is in the discourse in the media now. That's what everyone is talking about. And I think that's the typical strategy that Donald Trump uses. I should say the U.S. administration uses now, is they just put out this stuff knowing that they will capture all the media attention. And that's what everyone will be talking about. Remember at the beginning when Canada was the focus of the United States, when the United States said that Canada was a security threat to their nation, and that because so much fentanyl and drugs were crossing the border from Canada to the United States, that they had to impose tariffs upon us. And then to justify and build support for that among his followers, Donald Trump started referring to our prime minister as the governor, started insisting that Canada wasn't really a nation and should become the 51st state, started saying things like, well, we subsidize Canada. Why should we subsidize Canada? They've been ripping us off for years. And some media outlets started trying to Trump-splain that nonsense indicating that perhaps he was talking about the trade imbalance between the two countries. And perhaps this trade war and this imposition of tariffs on every country on earth is because the United States typically runs a trade deficit with other countries, meaning that the United States buys more from other countries than other countries purchase from the United States. The United States has the biggest consumers in the world, the wealthiest consumers, and they buy a lot from a lot of different countries. And those other countries, many of them poor, don't buy as much from the United States as they sell to the United States. That's a trade imbalance. The word deficit sounds very negative, but it's merely a product of the United States consumers wanting to buy lots of things from other countries. So the imposition of tariffs was supposed to balance this out. And the United States was going to go after all those countries that they ran trade deficits with. The biggest one being China, and Canada also a country that the United States runs a trade deficit with. So why are they going after Brazil right now? Here's a chart taken from the Census Government of the United States webpage. And this chart is U.S. trade in goods with Brazil. There's a lot of numbers on this chart, but the only ones that are really important are the totals on the bottom. And what this chart shows is total exports, U.S. exports to Brazil. And all these figures are in millions of U.S. dollars. So the total exports, this column right here, is $49.1 billion. That's how much the U.S. exports to Brazil. It imports from Brazil $42.3 billion. So this is one country where the balance of trade is a positive number. They have a trade surplus with Brazil of $6.7 billion. Now, Brazil is a fairly populated country. It doesn't represent a huge portion of the United States trade, but this is one example where the United States has what it wants. It has a surplus with Brazil. Brazil buys more products from the US than it sells to the US. This is a positive. This is what the US wants. So of course, this is the country they're targeting now, because everything the US administration does now makes sense. I was being sarcastic there in case you didn't get it. So all this nonsense is taking up all the oxygen in the media. Will this actually happen? Will the US actually impose 50% tariffs on Brazil? And will Brazil reciprocate? And will they keep escalating until there's no trade between Brazil and the United States? Nobody knows. Now, it's unclear whether these 35% tariffs that are scheduled to start August 1st could be removed if the negotiations that Canada and the US are having now lead to some resolution by that July 21st deadline. If we get some sort of an agreement there, will these be removed? Will the 50% ones be removed? It's all chaos right now. But as this chaos unfolds on a daily basis, this is what's happening in the background. Reported here on Yahoo Finance from Reuters, Canada seeks pact with Southeast Asian countries to diversify trade. And here is Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand. She's speaking during an interview in Kuala Lumpur, where she's seeking to do a deal with Asian countries. Canada is seeking to finalize a free trade deal with Southeast Asian nations as part of a push to expand into new markets. Foreign Minister Anita Anand said Canada intends to continue a multilateral trade relationship with the 10-member Association of South Asian nations. She says it is complex, but we are very much looking forward to it being completed as soon as possible. Now, this is a good thing. Our government is working to create new trade relationships with other nations in the world other than the United States. Quietly in the background, our Prime Minister and other government ministers, as well as provincial leaders, are all working together to diversify Canada's trade opportunities. And look what else is happening in the background that's not really talked about very much. This is a graph of the euro versus the US dollar. And the graph starts in January when Donald Trump took office. And in January, the euro was worth about $1.02 US. And in this 6-month period right now, the euro is worth $1.17. So it's up approximately 15% versus the US dollar. That means that everything the United States wants to buy from Europe is going to cost 15% more. Do Americans understand this? This is a graph of the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar from when Trump was elected to president. And in January, the Canadian dollar was worth approximately 69 cents US. And right now, it's worth approximately 73 cents US. That's approximately a 6% increase in the value of the Canadian dollar. So everything that the United States wants to buy from Canada now, other than commodities that are traded in US dollars, if it wants to buy a product from Canada, made in Canada, it's going to cost them 6% more in US dollars. Look at this graph. This is a graph of the US dollar versus the ruble. When Donald Trump was elected, the US dollar could buy 104 rubles, Russian rubles. And now the US dollar buys 78 rubles. The US dollar has dropped almost 25% versus the Russian ruble. Not that the United States imports very many things from Russia, but do the Americans know this? Do the Americans see these trends? Trump delays deadline for trade deals. Canada's deadline remains in place. Reported on CTV News. Now they use the word trade deals loosely here. There are no trade deals. These are discussions of the disruptions that Donald Trump has introduced. Donald Trump, or the United States of America, has introduced a slew of what they call reciprocal tariffs aimed at countries all over the world. So they've introduced this disruption, and now they want to talk to all these countries about the disruption that they introduced. And they're characterizing this as trade deals. So these aren't trade deal discussions. These are just discussions about the disruption that Donald Trump introduced. I could give you a colorful analogy. It would be like Donald Trump in the Oval Office, standing up and turning around and having a poop on his Resolute desk, and then calling all his administration into the office with him to discuss the poop on his desk. What are we going to do about the poop that's on my desk? We need to discuss this and get to the bottom of this. Why is there poop on my desk? White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump will sign an executive order Monday to delay the threatened tariffs until August 1st, but Canada was not targeted by those global tariffs and is committed to coming up with some sort of a bilateral deal with the US by July 21st. The Prime Minister's office said on Monday it was still working toward that deadline. And that's the correct thing to do. We need to have those talks and patiently progress with those. But at the same time, we have to support and be grateful of our government reaching out to many, many other countries in the world, forming new trade relationships. And just so you all understand that regardless of what happens by this July 21st deadline, whether we miraculously come to an agreement that, of course, the US will characterize as the greatest accomplishment and the best deal ever done in the history of the world, whether that happens or not, this story is not over. We have to anticipate more and more of the same. In fact, the USMCA, which is the real trade agreement that governs trade between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, an agreement that really isn't worth the paper that it's written on, as Canada and Mexico have realized now, but it is the agreement that still governs the majority of trade between our three countries. The USMCA is scheduled for a joint review by the three member countries, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, on July of 2026. So 1 year from now, almost exactly, we're going to be going through this all over again. We will be having discussions about the renegotiation of trade between Canada and the United States, regardless of what is agreed to by July 21st, a few weeks from now. We have no idea what the inflammatory rhetoric, what the Truth Social posts, or what the tweets will be, or what Donald Trump will say next year as we approach this July renegotiation of the USMCA, which, by the way, is the agreement that he signed in 2018. It'll be interesting to see how Trump characterizes that deal, whether it was the worst deal ever done. And I don't know who could make such a terrible deal, but we have to renegotiate that deal. Will he just slide under the carpet that he was the guy that actually signed it? It doesn't really matter. He can say whatever he wants. The point that I'm trying to make is I don't anticipate any end to the bluster and the rhetoric and the news cycle and the US administration and Donald Trump trying to suck up all the oxygen all the time and be the focus of the news cycle. We will always be surrounded by that chaos. For a while, Trump was after Canada, then he was after the Panama Canal, then he was after Greenland, then he was after China, now he's after Brazil. That's just going to continue. What we have to do as a country is just focus, do our work quietly in the background, like Mark Carney has, as he's visited Europe, talked to European leaders. He's had discussions with Japan. He's reignited dialogue with India and China. He invited the president of Mexico to the G7. Our minister is now meeting with the 10 bloc Asian countries to form a free trade agreement with them. We're signing on as partners in that $1.3 trillion increased military spending deal with the EU. A lot of things are happening quietly in the background, and we have to let our government work without all the inflammatory rhetoric and the nonsense in the news. I again continue to be cautiously optimistic. Cautiously because you never know what the elephant just south of us is going to do. Optimistically because our government, from all the reports I review for all of you, they're constantly on the right track. They're doing the right things. They're quietly negotiating. They're trying to get things done. As opposed to what fills the news cycle is the constant bluster and nonsense that comes from Donald Trump. So we'll see how all this shakes out, whether anything comes of the discussions we're having with the United States now by July 21st. In the meantime, we'll pursue deals with everyone else in the world. Thanks for watching, everybody. Subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Leave some comments in the comments section. And if you wish to support my work in the channel monetarily on a monthly basis, consider becoming a channel member. Just click the join button below or click the link that I leave in my comment that I pin to the top of the comment section in almost every video. Have a fantastic rest of your day in this absolutely gorgeous country we live in. It's the middle of the summer and things just couldn't be better. I'll catch you all on the next one.